She's Katie Montgomery. He's Justin Joseph. These best friends are serving subpoenas to bad advice weekly with Wrong Way Forward. Now, here's Katy and Justin.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward, where we are talking about something that's probably impacted all of us at one time or another. Certainly, Katie, as you know, you have nieces and nephews. Yours are not of drinking age yet, but mine are. And they just, like when we go to a football game and my brother and I are like, yeah, let's drink. It's football. And they're like, we'll have a drink. They're just not, this generation is just, they're not drinkers.
Well, I mean, that's what I'm reading, and that's what all the studies are showing. But with that being said, I just was having dinner with a group of friends, and they have 2 children, and they said, okay, we're going to Amsterdam for spring break. When in Europe, do as Europeans do. And they told their children they could have a drink, like 1 glass of wine with dinner.
Right.
And the soon-to-be 18-year-old declined, and the 14-year-old was like, pour it on up. So who knows what the new generation is going to be doing. I do think a lot of that too is socialized. So I remember, we went to college in New Orleans. We were both in
drinking
the Greek
age
system.
18.
Yes, drinking age 18. And it was very much within the kind of social group we hung out with. Drinking was regular, frequent, and heavy. I remember going to law school. Yeah, and I went to law school directly out of college. And there were a handful of us who, that first year of law school was just, our 5th year in college. It was a continuation. And I was just amazed that all these people who went to these different schools, they would drink. It's not like they were sober, but it just was a different kind of party culture. So I also think it's who you were raised by, what you're around, what kind of area you live in, what kind of culture you're around. And so I think it really varies. And I think, in fact, we have a very skewed sense of alcohol because it was just so prevalent and normal in our kind of childhood and kind of maturing
100%.
experience.
Well, what's interesting, because this week we're talking about being around sober people. And what's interesting is that, I threw a traders party we usually do a derby party. And this year we did a traders derby party. And so there were 16 people, but in traders, I've talked about this before on the air, you try and have a different mix of people. So I invited people from different friend groups so that it would be an interesting mix. So I had my heavy drinking friends and then my friends who don't drink a lot. And it was the worst worst party I've ever thrown. By the end of it, I'm like, just shut up and play the game. Because everyone was so wasted.
Don't you think though, I think probably one of the worst things on earth is to be a sober person around drunk people, because you aren't in on the fun. You think they're being ridiculous. Their behavior is completely exaggerated. You're like, we're operating on a scale of 3 and you're already at a 7.
Yeah.
So, this is why, we struggled in college to find a double D, not a bra size, but a designated driver. Because it's painful to be, I think, the sober one among a bunch of inebriated people.
100%. And if anyone was thinking about going sober, if they would have come to this party, they would have left a sober person. Been like, yeah, I think I'm good. I think I'm done. So the jumping off point for this week is a New York Times article that discusses this. And so we'll read it and we'll take it up on the other side. The article is by Philip Galanes. It says, I've been sober for 1 year after many decades of heavy drinking. By now, I am somewhat comfortable being around others when they drink. I also enjoy entertaining friends in my apartment, but I no longer maintain a well-stocked bar, nor do I wish to. So what should I do about dinner parties? And then he talks about wanting to be a gracious host, etc. Should I ask in advance if they want to drink and stock it? Should I buy a bottle of red and white wine and hope that suffices? That seems stingy. Or should I tell my guests that dinners bring your own bottle? And the advice columnist writes back, first, let me commend you on your sobriety. Making meaningful and positive change after decades of habitual behavior is a big achievement. Well done.
Yes.
So making note, yes, cheer, here. Well done. So making note of your phrase, you write that you are somewhat comfortable being around drinking and keeping relative stakes in mind and protecting your sobriety versus giving a dinner party. I suggest that you hold off serving booze for now. Your sobriety is relatively new, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the recommendation is hold off for serving booze. Basically, do not keep a stock bar. Is that the right way forward, Katie?
Well, I've really thought about this a lot, and to kind of share something is, my family, including my father and my siblings, big drinkers, love to go out to dinner and have pre-drinks and then a cocktail, while we're waiting, for the waiter, and then having maybe
Part of the
another.
experience, isn't it?
Yes, and then having bottles of wine and then having an after dinner drink, and it's part of the social experience. My mother, probably the last 20 to 25 years of her life was sober. And when I was so young when she became sober, I mean, I was probably around 25 years old. And so I was naive about addiction and sobriety and what that looked like and how difficult that might have been for her. But she always was with us. There was alcohol in the house because my father drank. We would go to restaurants. No one abstained from drinking alcohol, and she was able to handle her sobriety. I think what he's missing is like the nuance, right? Is it's like, what are you comfortable with? And I think this person is clearly comfortable with serving alcohol because they're offering those options. I think they just
Sure.
don't want to keep a well-stocked bar. And this might be very naive because, again, I'm not although some of our listeners may think so based on the stories we tell, I am not an alcoholic, but I have struggled, with food. And I think, part of this is that you need to know your boundaries. And if that boundary is that you cannot have any alcohol in your home, if you're the hostess or the host, you determine the rules of engagement. And, and hopefully people are thankful that you were generous enough to have them in their home. But I think that there are a lot of other options that can be had. And I think the question that we're missing here is, what does this look like long term for you? And I
Mhm.
can't imagine a world where you're not around alcohol. This is, I think all addictions are difficult and struggles, but you don't go to sit in a nice restaurant and there's an option to have heroin, right? I mean,
Right.
alcohol is everywhere. I mean, it is at
Mhm.
sporting events, it is at restaurants, it's in other people's homes, it's on airplanes. And so, can you live, like a monk? Well, monks drink a lot, but can, they make beer. But anyway,
And they drink
can you
church
live
wine.
like that? Or do you want to be able to kind of operate within this space? And I think this a lot of like analogous. It's like, when I've been really serious about my diet and exercise, sometimes I just don't partake in social activities because that's the way for me to kind of maintain kind of, what I'm trying to do. But that's not a solution long term to being healthy and well. And I think about, people, are you never going to be around someone who smokes? Or, for example, if you are, let's use, for example, Muslim and you have a certain kind of dietary restrictions, are you not going to go, eat with friends? And I think it's a bigger conversation about how you want to operate in the world and where you're comfortable and what is kind of the long-term solution.
Yeah, I agree. And this is always one of the things that's fascinating about alcoholism is that to me there are degrees of alcoholics. You hear about, and I have a friend who was married to a man that you she'd go in his sock drawer and find a bottle of vodka hidden because he wants to wake up and drink. That
Yeah.
to me is a different level of alcoholism, and this may be very naive.
Yeah.
It's shocking. Different level of alcoholism that someone who feels like they binge drink too much. And so if you are the type of alcoholic that you are hiding vodka in your sock drawer, you should not be around alcohol, period. You shouldn't
Correct.
probably have those kinds of friends until you were 5, 10 years sober. That's different than if someone who says, for health reasons, I'm going to drink less or stop drinking or whatever. Then you can keep a stocked bar. You can go to dinner with friends. Do you think that that's a fair statement?
I mean, I think, of course, again, citing our ignorance on kind of alcoholism and addiction. But yeah, I do think that there's grades of this, and this is someone who I think is, open to hosting. And I think one of the reasons what I found a little frustrating was that there weren't kind of alternative solutions offered. So just to give an example before we kind of take a break is, everyone knows I'm from the deep South and I'm from Mississippi. And there are some people who are teetotalers, like they don't drink,
What is it? Teetotalers
Yeah, these are people who refrain from drinking. So
for
this is
religious
not a good
reasons?
example. Well, yeah, and so, kind of think about like Footloose, where the kids couldn't dance and drink, and so there was a Southern Baptist who married from Tupelo, Mississippi, who married a Catholic boy from New Orleans. And there was a wedding reception at the Tupelo Art Gallery, and it was dry. I mean, there was no alcohol served. you can't marry a boy from New Orleans and have a completely dry wedding.
Right.
And so that family from New Orleans rented a U-Haul, set it up outside the Tupelo Art Gallery, and set up an open bar. And
I
I
love
think
this.
that's a really clever solution.
That's the kind
to
of family I want to marry into.
100%. So, but I think the example there is that this might not be what you find tasteful. This might be outside of your realm of comfort, but we're going to kind of offer an alternative solution and a compromise. So you kind of strict on alcohol family, you're not hosting it, you're not paying for it, you're not condoning it. But if somebody wants to take a little, kind of walk outside and, and get refreshed at the, U-Haul, that's fine. I think that's a clever way to kind of address that. And I think what I thought was interesting is this guy was like, absolutely not. And I think there are so many different options in between. And I think when we come back, we could kind of talk through some of those.
Let's do that. We'll do that on the other side. We'll be back with Wrong Way Forward.
You've been listening to Wrong Way Forward, where bad advice goes to die and then gets resurrected just so we can roast it again.
If you're enjoying the chaos, hit like and subscribe and come back every Thursday for new episodes.
Have a new topic or some disastrously bad advice you want to dissect? Email wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Include your contact info.
Now back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin podcast.
And we're back, and we're discussing someone who has been 1 year of sobriety, wants to host a dinner party, and is asking, what should I do? I mean, the people who are coming into my home are drinkers. They consume alcohol, but I don't necessarily want to have it staying here. I don't want to have a fully stocked bar. And I think what we both have a problem with, and we think is the wrong way forward with the advice, is that it was like all or nothing. It was like, either have alcohol, don't have alcohol, and then don't kind of engage. And I think there's a lot of other opportunities. So one thing that I really thought about is, and this could be kind of outside of their budget, but why not hire a bartender? Why not hire, a beverage captain? I mean, there are lots of people.
Captain?
Beverage captain could be like someone who kind of you could appoint someone to kind of be in charge of the beverages. And so you don't have to engage with it. So I could say, Justin, I'm having this party. Can you kind of be the beverage captain?
Got it.
But I think you could hire a bartender. Bartenders can come, for a certain fee with the stocked bar, and then they take whatever is left. Right. And so I think that's an option. Why does it have to be hosting in the evening? That's a great idea. Yeah. Why does it have to be hosting in the evening? Everybody knows alcohol consumption tends to go up at night. And so,
with my friends, it starts at brunch. So you'd have to host an early morning breakfast.
But my point is that a lot of people sometimes, when I have hosted like a large brunch, unless there's a real objective to get drunk, it's just the consumption is different, right? There's a different kind of take to it, And then what I've also thought about is, I think it's completely fine to do a BYOB, or there are lots of places that just have beer and wine and like one or two kind of like cocktails of the day, like this is going to be kind of a signature cocktail. And you could, pre-mix those and then go there. Also, I think if these are really good friends, I would just lean on one or two people to actually ask, I'm excited to have everybody over. What are your thoughts on this? I think just going kind of, not to make a pun here with alcoholism, is going cold turkey. I just don't think that's realistic. And I don't think that that's learning how to long-term cope with the problem, as long as you are comfortable with the 1 year kind of behind you.
Mm-hmm. And I think to piggyback on your beverage captain idea, I think the important thing is to take the stigma, the secrecy off of it. If you're hosting a dinner party or you're sober, you say that. You say, I'm a year sober. I don't know what to do here. So I'm not going to be serving liquor, but you bring your own. Feel free, knock yourself out. I'll be serving fabulous mocktails, but take the stigma, the uncomfortableness around it off of it, and just own it. And I think that's a beverage captain would go a long way towards that.
Yeah.
Like,
I think,
as you know, so-and-so's not drinking.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking about cute things. Like you could go on Amazon and buy like 10 plastic flasks, and like get a paint pen and monogram them and say, everybody bring, and like add the invitation with the bow and say, BYOB, bring your own flask, and so people could like, make it cute and fun and kind of, bring it into the theme. I mean, there are so many different ideas here.
I was going to say not to bring it back to the traders party again. One of the challenges we did was I had a wicker basket that covered it. At one point, the people who were left, I think there was 11 people still in the game at that point. I picked up the wicker basket and I had solo cups with clear liquid in them. And I said, everybody come up and get a cup. The next challenge is 2 of these cups actually have tequila. The rest have water. So we'll sit around the table. Here are your options. And this would be a fun game for at a sober party. Here are your options. You can, if you are not drinking, you can say there's tequila in here and I'm not drinking. You could be lying. You could not be. If you are drinking, you can take the drink. And if it's tequila, you can act like it's water. Or if it's water, you can act like it's tequila. But that would be a fun party game to play as well.
Yeah. Well,
did that throw you for a loop?
It didn't throw me for a loop, but I do think it's a great party.
It'd be a great party game.
But unless you are the alcoholic and everybody's drunk and you're like, fuck it, this is tequila. I can smell it and I'm going to chug this as fast as I can.
No, but that's why you say that I am an alcoholic. This is tequila. So of course I'm not drinking it. It could be water, but you just,
no, but what I'm saying is that puts I'm just saying that it puts the temptation, it puts the risk in your hand. I'm saying.
Yeah. So and it's probably not an ideal party game.
And the point of the night, that sober person is like, I can't take this anymore. Everyone around me is out of control. And they'd be like,
they won't know.
Somebody could say, I'm an alcoholic and this is water, and be like, thank God the burn's so good.
Okay, so do not take my advice. Once again, probably skip this portion, go straight to block C. It does remind me, we have a mutual friend who's a fraternity brother who is sober.
I'm thinking, does he live in your region of the country?
Yes, he lives in Denver.
Yes,
and
yes.
so
I don't want to give away anything, but yes.
Yeah, he invites us all over for a crawfish boil once a year. Anyway, last time he invited us over, I think he did say on the invitation, as you know, I don't drink, bring your own. So I, of course, showed up with a case of wine. And and I actually prefer that because I can drink my own wine that I want.
Yeah, maybe you're drinking this Miami.
Well, we may have lost. Katie may have frozen up one more time. So, are you back for us?
I don't know. Can I tell?
Either way, we're going to take a break. We'll be back on the other side of Wrong Way Forward to wrap up. We'll be right back after this. Thanks for streaming Wrong Way Forward, the weekly reminder that advice is usually free for a reason. We call out bad advice wherever it hides: boardrooms, break rooms, and even book clubs.
Enjoying this dumpster fire? Like, subscribe, and check back every Thursday for new episodes. Want us to roast your favorite piece of nonsense? Email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com. Be sure to include your contact info. We're not psychic, just judgmental. And now, back to Wrong Way Forward.
Roasting the worst advice ever. Welcome back to the Katy and Justin.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. When we signed off last, we were talking about my fraternity brother who invites us to a party, and he kind of just comes out and says, like, I'm not a drinker, so bring whatever you want. And I think that's the right way forward, because then it enables everyone to do their own thing. I walked in with, like I said, 4 bottles of wine. And yeah, it's just the way to do it. What do you think, Katie?
I think so, except, Justin one time told us, have y'all heard of this great wine? It's called Mayoni. And we thought it was going to be the best wine of all time. And then we were at Costco and I'm like, it's $9.99. I don't know if this is good stuff, but you do love a Mayoni. No, I think that's a great idea. Well, I used to love a
Mayoni. I drank so much of it, I can't even drink it anymore. It's very jammy, and I've got one in my wine fridge right now that it's going to sit there forever.
Yeah. Well, we drank some good stuff when we were at your house, but here's the thing. I think at the end of the day, if these are people that are good enough friends with you for you to invite them into your home and share a meal, you should feel comfortable enough with them to say, hey, this is what's going on. What do you think? What would you be comfortable with? What would you like to do? I think, if you're inviting a bunch of strangers into your home that know nothing about you to share a meal that you are hosting and cooking for them, I think that that's where kind of the misalignment is.
I also think that this new trend, and we've got them here in Denver, I don't know if you will have them in Birmingham, this new trend of mocktail bars. I mean, there's some good mocktails. They're just as expensive as an alcoholic drink too, but there's some good options out there.
Yeah, and I think, you can buy some, canned things and kind of serve and here and there. And so whatever people can kind of take with them. But I think there's a lot of options here that I think this New York Times advice giver was, and I wonder if his immediate response was, this is addiction, this is alcoholism, this is something that I'm not an expert in. So I'm going to really, really be conservative in my answer. And I think that goes back to you saying the shame around it and just having an open dialogue about, what is at play here. And so I wonder if that's why the person defaulted to such an uber conservative, in my view, approach to the issue.
Here's my question for you, because I remember going to dinner with your mother, and we had the pre-drinks, the drinks, the dinner drinks, and the post-dinner drinks. She was a hoot. I have an in-law who was the same thing. She was so funny and hilarious and big personality while drinking, and she stopped drinking. Like, was she still fun? I don't think I ever was around your mom when she was sober.
She was definitely fun. And I think, what happened is, my mom only drank in the evening. She was a high functioning person. And I think what she realized is, I think alcohol can be a depressant, right? So it can, make people kind of quiet, not participate. And I think for other people, it's a social lubricant. It makes you more extroverted. It makes you more fun. It makes you loose. And I think what happened is, sometimes it was more of a depressant for her, but she was the best sober person and really high participation, really engagement. And you know what? Sense of humor doesn't come with alcohol. Sense of humor is a core trait.
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, it is, I guess it's hard for me to say, but it is true. So, well, that's this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. As always, we welcome your feedback. Katie, where can everybody find us? Our text line, 720-251-4450.
And
Katie,
you can also,
our other handles?
You can also find us on LinkedIn, TikTok, Facebook, and then also YouTube. And you can also email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week on Wrong Way Forward.
All right, that's a wrap on this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward. Remember, the only thing worse than taking bad advice is giving it.
If you've liked what you've heard, like, subscribe, or follow us wherever you stream podcasts. And if you've got a topic or need some advice we'll probably regret giving, email us at wrongwayforwardpodcast@gmail.com.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Wrong Way Forward.